Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 5 of my toy sheep series, and in this video we're going to work more on the sheep and also on the trunk. If you want to follow along with traditional supplies, check out part 1 in this series where I have a list of all the canvas and the materials and the paint and the brushes that I use. The app that we're going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android. And I'm going to go ahead and finish working a little bit more on the trunk. And I just kind of want to get a little bit of a lighter surface on the top of the trunk here. And so you would use a lot of light brown colors for this. And probably if you're following along with your acrylics, you could use burnt umber and add a bunch of white acrylic gesso, and then for the leather parts that you put on that cover the corners of this trunk, you could add some cadmium orange to that mixture. You just want kind of a light orange color there, kind of a maybe even add some burnt sienna to it, and then darken it on the edges of the trunk there. And we'd want to add the brads that hold it onto the trunk there, so you would use a darker brown for those and just make little round circles there. And you just kind of want to work on getting the edge of the trunk here, and I'm trying to make the front edge of the trunk straighter here, and so I'm using the straight edge tool in Infinite Painter. You can use a T-square or a ruler if you're following along traditionally, and you just kind of want to get a straight edge on the part of the bottom of the trunk and on the sides of it. And here I'm just kind of working on the trunk and trying to get the top edge straight. Also, you want to get the top edge straight, so I'm using the straight edge tool for that. And it doesn't matter if it goes across the sheep's legs right now, because I'm not finished with them yet. I'll work on them later. And here I'm just putting a little bit of some of the shadow underneath the sheep, just a little bit of some purple, light purple color, just to give an indication of the shadow. The light source is going to be a soft night light, so you want to have softer shadows too. You don't want real harsh shadows. And then I'm just kind of working on the top of the trunk again, and you want a light brown color there, because that will be where the light is hitting it. And I'm just trying to get the leather covers on the edge there and put those in. And you have to use a darker color for the leather on the sides, and then a lighter one on the top of the trunk. And you have to do that on all the corners, so I'm just kind of working on getting that. And I was working on trying to get a good texture for the trunk, because it's covered with burlap, sort of. I think it's burlap. And so you kind of want a rough looking texture there. And so I'm using the Vermeer brush or the Angelo brush and trying to adjust the texture on it just a little bit, because we want kind of a rough stroke to it. And if you're following along traditionally, you'll do a dry brush technique, and that's kind of what I want to get, the look of a dry brush. And what that is you just put a little bit of paint on your paintbrush, and probably your filbert brush, or number 8 filbert brush, or a flat brush will work for this. And you just make rough strokes and smudge them out with a paper towel or your finger, and you don't want to leave big thick strokes there. You want to sort of smudge them out and soften them. And you don't have to cover all the dark paint up either. You kind of want it to show through, and that just gives you some of the look of the texture. And so here I'm kind of working on the edge, the back edge of the trunk, and the way that you can do this traditionally and digitally is to just draw in the background a little bit better. And so I was working on the clouds, And then here I'm trying to straighten up the edge, and you can use the straight edge tool for that to get the back straight on the trunk. And you definitely want your edges straight on the trunk, otherwise it'll look like it's bent. And if you've got an old beat up trunk, you might want that look, but this one's not that beat up looking, so we want it to have a nice straight edge. And on the left side you want it to be dark because this will be the shadowed side, so you can use a burnt sienna color or mix it with burnt umber if you're following along traditionally, and throw in some white acrylic gesso, and that will give you that kind of brown color there. And then here I'm just working a little bit more on the edge of the trunk, trying to get it straight. And the bug that makes that line draw across your screen happened again, so I'll have to work on that and fix that. And that's why you want sometimes things to be on a totally separate layer, and this one's not a completely separate layer, so sometimes you just have to work over these things again. And if you're following along traditionally and you make a stray mark, you just have to cover it up with paint, or if you can catch it quick enough, you can wipe it off with a paper towel and a little bit of water. You don't want a lot of water because you may wipe off your background. But here I've got it mostly on a separate layer. Now the problem is that I had the stars and their glow on this layer, so it caused a little bit of trouble, so I had to go back and correct that and put the glow back in around the stars by using the airbrush, and then go back in and paint in the stars again a little bit because it erased the edges of them. So I had to just work back over that again. And sometimes this happens when you're painting traditionally and you don't know that you have dropped some paint on the stars or the background, and you come back and you see it and it's already dry. And this is what you would have to do as well on traditional paintings too, is to just go ahead and paint over it again. And since I didn't have this on a completely separate layer, that's what I'll have to do here. And then again it did that bug, but this time I was able to undo it and make it go away. And then I could just go ahead and work on the star again and put the glow around it and add the light yellow to it and just kind of tweak the edges and add the bow back onto it and just get it fixed again. Sometimes you have to do that. A lot of people use lots and lots of different layers, and so that takes care of that problem, but I tend to only use a few layers, so sometimes I run into problems like these. And here I had to fix that star as well, and so I'm just working on it again with the Blackwell brush or the Leo brush, and you can use your script brush for these if you're following along traditionally. And so I'm just kind of trying to get the edges straightened up on the trunk and clean up the edges on the shadows and just doing some overall maintenance work. And then here I'm working on the sheep's legs finally and adding a little bit of some woolly looking texture. And you can use the Leo brush or you can use the Blackwell brush. It will give a good texture because it's the pencil, and that's what you want for the sheep because you want a soft woolly look here. And so I'm just kind of working on his front legs, around his hooves, drawing the split in the hooves there. And you can use a dark brown for that, and your script brush, if you're following along traditionally, use burnt umber or something, just kind of a dark color. You could even use dark purple if you want. And then here I'm working on his house shoes a little bit. I want to take a light green color, probably phthalo yellow green and hooker's green, mix those together with some white, and you'll get this light pale green. And then I just want to go ahead and adjust the edges on the slippers, and you can probably use your number 3 round if you're following along traditionally. We just want some details here, not big details because the slippers are fuzzy, so it doesn't matter if the edges are not real crisp, and in fact we kind of don't want that. We want soft edges because these are soft slippers. And then I'm working on the lock on the trunk here, or the clasp. And it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, just kind of get some dark shapes here that look like the clasp of the trunk and draw them in, and then take some highlight color and draw some details, a little bit of details along there. It doesn't have to be highly detailed. You just put in enough detail to sort of fool the eye into thinking that it's actually more detailed than it might be. This is a little painting trick. That's why sometimes I call the painting a sort of an illusion, because it's kind of like what magicians do. You fool the eye. And so here I'm just trying to go ahead and straighten the edges out again a little bit more. And the edges for the opening of the trunk, you want to make sure that that one's straight across there, because it's the front of the trunk. So you can take the straight line tool and just make a little dark line, and then do that on the side. So this is the end of part 5 of my toy sheep series, and in part 6 we're going to just go ahead and finish out, put all the final details, and finish the sheep out and the trunk and work on the carpet. So if you want to see that, then hit that subscribe button, and thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.